Get ready for a quick quest guide for the freeing Evil Dave part of Recipe for Disaster, in which the main rewards for completing are 7,000 cooking XP, the ability to catch Hellrats and have your cat turn into a Hellcat, the ability to obtain spices to make spicy stews which are great for boosting stats, increased access to the Culinaromancer's chest, and 1 quest point. You'll need to have completed the Another Cook's quest before taking on this one, as well as Gertrude's cat and Shadow of the Storm. And when it comes to skills, you'll need 25 cooking. Then for items, you'll want 9 stews, and very importantly an adult cat that you'll be using to catch lots of rats. Definitely know that an overgrown cat will not work here as they cannot chase rats, and also know that a kitten is only 1/5 as effective at catching rats as an adult cat. And so even though it takes 3 hours to have a kitten grow up, I highly recommend letting your kitten become an adult before taking on this quest. For context, an adult cat has a 50% catch rate for rats, while a kitten only has a 10% catch rate. If you've completed the Ratcatchers quest, then know that you can use Wiley or Lazy Cats, which have a 70% and 41% catch rate respectively. When it comes to recommended items, you'll just want a charged Amulet of Glory and additionally 1 Lumbridge teleport. Finally, know that it can be helpful to have a notepad and pen or a Word doc open to jot some things down. Now we'll begin this quest within the Instance Dining Room in Lumbridge Castle, which is accessed from the ground floor. Inside, you'll simply want to click or right-click on Evil Dave and select Inspect before going through the chat with Aris, which will officially start this part of Recipe for Disaster. Next, use your Amulet of Glory and teleport to Edgeville before heading into the house just west of the bank, whereby you'll find Dave's mother Doris. Talk to Doris and firstly ask, "Is Dave in?" before then saying, "Yes, I'm evil," and finishing the chat. Now open the trapdoor along the western wall and go down into the basement filled with Hellrats, whereby you'll find Evil Dave from an alternate timeline. Talk to Evil Dave and ask, "What did you eat at the secret council meeting?" And after some more chatter say, "You've got to tell me because the magic requires it," before continuing through the rest of the chat. Afterwards, climb back up the ladder and talk to Doris once again before going through the chat with her, and once it finishes, climb back down the trapdoor into the basement. Now drop your cat so that it's following you, and it's time to catch heaps of rats. To do this, simply click on your cat and select Chase, which will see it run off and attempt to catch a rat. Whether your cat fails or is successful in hunting a rat, it'll return back to you right away. But should your cat be successful in hunting a rat, then some ashes and a 1, 2, 3 or 4 dose spice will fall onto the ground, which you'll want to pick up. These spices come in 4 different colors, being yellow, orange, red, and brown. You'll essentially just need to keep selecting Chase on your cat to have them kill Hellrats repeatedly and pick up the spices that drop until you have 6 doses of each colored spice, again being yellow, orange, red, and brown. Note that during this time your cat will eventually transition into a Hellcat itself, and also that if you get extra spices it's best to keep them, as post-quest they can be helpful for making stat boosting stews. Plus with 60 construction you can make a spice rack in your POH kitchen and store them there. Once you have at least 6 of each colored spice, then pick up your cat. And it's now time to use trial and error to figure out how many of each colored spice mixed into a stew will make the perfect stew for Evil Dave. And note that this will have a unique combination for everyone, and so your correct combination will very likely be different to mine. To start, use your yellow spice on one of your stews, and afterwards, being very careful not to eat it, select to use the stew on Evil Dave to see what he says. If he says, I think you've got the amount of 1 spice right, but the others are wrong, then your final product is confirmed to have 1 yellow spice. But if he says, that's nothing like the stew I tasted, all the spices are wrong, then you'll want to use 2 doses of yellow spice on your next stew and then use that stew on Evil Dave once again. If he says, I think you've got the amount of 1 spice right, but the others are wrong, then your final product is confirmed to have 2 yellow spices added. But if he says, that's nothing like the stew I tasted, all the spices are wrong, then your final product will be confirmed to have 3 yellow spices added. Once you know the correct number of yellow spices, jot it down and then move on to your orange spice and repeat. So start by giving him a stew with only one orange spice added, and if he says the amount of one spice is right, then your final stew is confirmed to need one orange spice. If he says all the spices are wrong, then give him a stew with 2 orange spices added. If he then says the amount of one spice is right, then the final stew is confirmed to need 2 orange spices. But if he says all the spices are wrong, then the final stew is instead confirmed to need 3 orange spices. Once you know the correct number of orange spices, jot it down and move on to your red spice and do the same thing. Give him a stew with 1 red spice added, and if he says the amount of 1 spice is right, then your final stew is confirmed to need 1 red spice. If he says all the spices are wrong, then give him a stew with 2 red spices added. Following this, if he says the amount of 1 spice is right, then the final stew is confirmed to need 2 red spices. But if he says all the spices are wrong, then the final stew is instead confirmed to need 3 red spices. Once you know the correct number of red spices, jot it down and move on to your brown spice and do the same thing. Give him a stew with 1 brown spice added, and if he says the amount of 1 spice is right, then your final stew is confirmed to need 1 brown spice. If he says all the spices are wrong, then give him a stew with 2 brown spices added. Following this, if he says the amount of 1 spice is right, then the final stew is confirmed to need 2 brown spices. But if he says all the spices are wrong, then the final stew is instead confirmed to need 3 brown spices. Once you know the correct number of brown spices, jot it down. Following this, you'll have worked out the needed doses for each of the 4 colored spices individually, and you'll then want to add those amounts to a single stew. For me, that was 3 of each type of spice, but for you, it'll likely be something different. Once you've done this, then be very careful not to eat it, and right-click and use the stew that you added all the spices to on Evil Dave. And if you're correct, he will say the stew is totally evil and exactly how it tasted. Thankfully, he won't actually consume the stew, and you'll now need to go through the rest of the chat with Dave. Afterwards, all that's left to do is teleport to Lumbridge before running west into the Lumbridge castle and then opening the door and entering into the dining room. Once inside, be very careful not to eat it, and then use your spicy stew on Evil Dave and go through a short chat with him before BAM! Quest complete. You'll be awarded 7,000 cooking experience, the ability to catch Hellrats and have your cat turn into a Hellcat, the ability to obtain spices to make spicy stews which are great for boosting stats, increased access to the Culinaromancer's chest, and 1 quest point. Thanks so much for watching. Catch you in the next quest.